What is up, guys? Put a one in the chat if you can hear me, and then we will get started. Cool. Okay, let me just close this down. Right. So today's topic is the five senses of the soul. So we all know that we have five senses that we physically live, but we also have five senses of the soul. We have five senses in the spiritual as well. So, our five senses in the physical are we can see, we can hear, we can touch, we can taste, and we can smell. But what are the actual spiritual senses that we can actually use to actually get us to where we want to be? So, as we know, we are spiritual beings living in a physical experience. So, we have to know how to tap into the spiritual side in order to, get the most out of our success, to get the most out of our growth towards where we're going. So, there's different stages of learning. And the first one is unconscious incompetence. And this is where you don't know what you don't know. Now, if you don't know about the five senses of your soul, the five spiritual senses that we have, then how are you supposed to work on them? How are you supposed to use them and develop them to a stage where you can actually go out and know this and be in a stage of unconscious competence, right? And unconscious competence is the stage where you know it subconsciously, so you don't even need to think about what these are in order to live them in your day-to-day life. So knowing that these five senses, knowing them are something that can actually help you get to the success that you want, and the goal is to get to the unconscious competence level of knowing these things. So the first one is the mind. So that is our first sense of the spiritual. So we like to use an analogy of our mind being a garden. So whatever you plant in the garden of your mind is going to be what you will harvest. So whether you want it or not, the mind is a field, and whatever seeds you plant and the seeds that you plant are actually your thoughts. So whatever thoughts you're having, whatever seeds you're planting is the flowers and plants that you're going to get later. So how has your mind been recently? What's your mental been like? What have you actually been pouring into yourself lately? What thoughts have you been having? All of these kinds of things. How have you used the mind recently to get you to where you want to be? Have you been thinking positively? Have you been thinking in abundance? Have you been expressing gratitude? Or have you been living in doubt? Have you been living in fear? Have you been living in insecurities of whether your goals are actually going to be achieved or not? So whatever you have been pouring into yourself is what's going to harvest in the future. So we actually have seasons throughout the year. We have the spring, we have the summer, we have the fall, and we have the winter. Fall, American. We have the autumn, and then we have the winter. So whatever you pour into yourself in the spring is what you're going to harvest in the summer, in the autumn. So what have you actually been pouring into yourself, and that's what's going to be showing up in your life right now. Whatever you've been doing in the past 6 months of the year, the result is what you have right now. So the mind is actually the element of a person that enables them to be aware of the world and their experiences, and to think and to feel. So that's the definition of what the mind actually is. So we want to be aware of the right information as well, especially with the world that we live in right now. We are blessed to have this financial education because a lot of people can't access it. And we're also exposed to other things as well, like a deeper awareness of actually how the world actually works, and how all the governments work together to control the finances, for example, through banks and stuff like that. So we want to be aware of the right information because, like we said earlier, if we don't actually know it, we can't use it to our benefit. So being aware is actually everything. So the information you get access to and that you're now aware of is what has enabled you to either change your situation, or the lack of being aware of that information is what's keeping you in your situation now. So we have to get new ideas to think from. So as the sense of the mind, we have thoughts that come from the mind, right? And to change the thoughts we're having and to use our mind to actually, get the most out of what our senses of the spiritual world are actually telling us, we need to get new ideas to think from, because when we can change the way we think, we change the way we feel, ultimately change our actions, and then we change our results. So how do you actually get new ideas to think from? You get it from the personal development books that you read in, you get it from going to events, you get it from, listening to audios. We have all of this access to even go live, learning new information that can change our situations. So the more you know, the more you can do. So if you are feeling stuck, just think about it. It's because if you feel like you're stuck, it's because you don't know necessarily how to get out of being stuck. But now that we know that thoughts control the emotions you're having, and then your emotions control your actions, and then actions control the results, we know that to get to the root of the problem is to change the thoughts you're having, which will then get you out of that cycle of repeating the same thing over and over again. So every day we have to be pouring into your mind. So your mind is also an asset if you make it an asset, So having one of your senses being an asset is going to be something that's going to propel you to, where you want to be faster, especially in the spiritual side, because the spiritual side is the things that people don't necessarily see. So it's literally just you versus you, working on you every single day. So you have to pour into yourself every day. If you don't grow, then how are you going to teach other people how to grow? If you're not growing, how is your team going to grow? If you are not growing, how are you going to be able to continue teaching people to become better versions of themselves, right? Because if you're not growing, how are you supposed to teach other people, and how are people supposed to follow you if you're not leading by example and growing every single day? So even though sometimes there might be a repetition of topics that you read every day, for example, it's the repetition that is key, because that's what's going to change your paradigm. So even if you're growing a little bit every single day, even if it's just reading the same paragraph every single day until you actually understand the underlying meaning of it and how actually deep it goes, then that's still growth, because once you have that moment and it clicks, then it's going to stick with you. And that's what we want, right? So yeah, make sure you're always growing, because you always need new information to teach. Now, especially on my part, doing a call like this, sharing something that I have learned, I have to go out and learn it. I have to grow myself. I have to implement it myself as well in order to be able to teach it to you. So for me, holding a call like this, I have to, it's not like I force myself, but I get to grow more because I have the responsibility of teaching it to other people. So pouring into your mind every day is the key to your soul, and it's the key to keeping you on track with your spiritual success. And we all know what's created in the spiritual will always show up in the physical later. So the first sense of the soul is your mind. Now, the second sense is your will. So this is basically your willpower. So your will is actually a fixed and persistent intent or purpose. So what are you doing consistently and persisting with in the intentions and purpose? So for example, some things that you might need willpower for would be waking up early, or doing certain things on a daily basis to create that habit in the first place that will be the habit that's going to get you to where you want to go. But we need to remember that this is not for the weak, this is for the willing. So only if you are willing to put the work in will you actually accomplish the results you're looking for. Because you can want success all you want, but are you actually willing to do what it takes? Are you willing to make the sacrifices? Are you willing to put in the work? Are you willing to go through your fear of whatever it might be to actually grow from that, to grow through your to grow through the limiting beliefs that you might have? Are you willing to actually put in the work? Are you willing to go through the process and trust the process? It all comes down to your willpower. And there's this thing called a teachability index as well, and it basically means how coachable are you? And it's consistent of two things. So it consists of two things. The first one is, how willing are you, again, willpower, how willing are you to, learn something new? And how willing are you to accept change? If you're not willing to do either of those things, then technically your teachability index is very low. which means you can't learn, which means you can't be taught, which means you're going to stay stuck in the same place because you're not accepting the new ideas that have been given to you. So you can't actually, get those new ideas to think from, which means you can't change your emotions, which means you're still thinking the same thoughts that got you to where you were, and this is where you're stuck right now, or this is where you say you're stuck right now. And this is why some people continue repeating the same pattern and thinking they're stuck, is because they're not willing to listen, they're not willing to be coachable, they're not willing to, make the mistakes in some cases in order to learn from them, in order to grow from that. So yeah, with will. So the hardest thing about getting to the top is getting through the crowd at the bottom as well. Not everyone, but some people might not really accept the journey that you're on. They might, not believe in you. They might not necessarily understand what it's about, but that's fine, because they don't need to understand right now. As long as you believe in yourself and you believe that it's possible and you believe in that it's already done, then that is all you need for it to make it work. So the hardest thing about getting to the top is getting through the crowd at the bottom. And this includes sometimes the people that you love, the people that you might grow up with. Do you have the willingness to keep pushing through the hard times when no one else believes in you but yourself? Because you remember, we have to separate to elevate sometimes. We have to tap in and get the information, while other people are not so focused on, actually trying to understand this information, because they still don't understand, maybe why we're doing this in the first place. Tap in and get to know yourself as well. When we have to separate to elevate, it's not just separating ourselves from the people, but it's also to benefit ourselves, as we grow within being comfortable with ourselves as well. So tap into your own self and actually get to know yourself more and become the best version of yourself that way. Get to know your strengths, get to know your weaknesses, get to know what your fears are, get to know what patterns you might be repeating in your day-to-day life, get to know what habits you might need to work on, get to know what habits you might need to change, all this kind of stuff, right? You learn this when you start to spend more time with yourself and actually start working on yourself as well. So it's about having that willingness to keep going as well, and having that resilience too. And also another big one is actually I'm not going to mention that. Yeah, you have to develop the spiritual version of yourself in order for it to manifest into the physical. So that was the second sense of the soul, which was your willpower. Now the third sense of the soul is actually your emotions and the state of your the state that you feel, the state of your feelings. So if you feel good every day, then this is good, because you know that when you're in a good mood, that means that you're vibrating on a high level automatically. So when you think about your goals and you work towards your goals and you do the actions that you need to do to get to where you want to be, and you're feeling good, that is the highest form of vibration that you can put out. That's going to attract your goals back to you. However, if you're not feeling good every day, then that's when you're kind of sending the mixed signals out to the universe, all that kind of stuff, and you're attracting, you're not clear on what you want to attract into your life, right? So your emotions are actually the physical manifestation of your vibration. So whatever emotion you're feeling right now is literally telling you what vibrational state you're in right now. So obviously when you feel good, you know that you're in a high vibrational state, because you're physically showing the high vibration through your emotions. Because when you have good emotions, that means you've had good thoughts, and you have good thoughts by, thinking about positive things. And how are you going to feel bad and be in a low vibration when you're thinking about positive things, right? But also with emotions, we can't allow the outside circumstances to affect our inner peace, because the moment we let the outside circumstances that we have no control over affect our peace within us, that's the moment that we lose, because we've let an outside circumstance control the thoughts we're having, which control the emotions we have, which means we're lacking awareness in how these things actually affect our thoughts and emotions. So we can actually not control. So when you let the outside circumstances affect your inner peace, you're essentially saying that you're not in control of your thought processes, because you're letting it dominate your thoughts. And what we want to do at all times is you know, what's the thought that we want to have on our minds more than anything throughout the rest of the day? It's the thought of getting to our goals. You know, we have to be obsessed with this, okay? So if your dominating thought is something negative from an outside circumstance, obviously that's going to affect your vibration, right? So what's actually on the inside of you is what's going to affect the outside. So a lot of people think that, you know, they are a product of their environment, but their environment is actually a product of that, because the thoughts they have, the emotions they have, the actions they take determine the results, which is what is created in the environment. So it all comes down to what you're thinking, basically. What seeds are you planting in the mind, which was the first sense of the soul, right? So if you, for example, on day 1 out of 30, for like the first 2 weeks, if you were not feeling too great, and then on the 13th day or the 14th day, halfway through, right, you had the best day ever. As long as you can maintain that high vibration that you felt on the 14th or 13th day, even if the first 2 weeks you were not feeling it, as long as you can maintain that high vibration from the 14th day to the end of the month, to the 30th day, for example, then this is when you start to become consistent in feeling a higher vibration. And when you have the high vibration for a long enough period of time, that's what's going to keep you, when you keep it consistently, that's what's going to take you to your goal quicker, okay? So what's happening outside is actually a reflection of what's happening inside. So when we feel good, we actually automatically create, because feeling good is causing creation. So that is why when we feel good, we tend to do the actions more. We tend to put more work into what we're doing because we feel good, and we want to keep that feeling up because we feel good, because we know that our goal is already done. And when we know it's already done because we believe it's already done, we can actually bring it into our experience faster by doing the actions to get there faster. So think about this, right? If you haven't been consistent for 7 days, how can you expect things to change in your life if you haven't even been consistent for 7 days in a row? There's people who go, like, there's the people that we look up to, they do like 90-day runs, 100% focus from day 1 to 90. If we can't even stay focused for 7 days and be consistent for 7 days, how are we expecting to, you know, reach the levels that they've reached? I know obviously they've had the whole journey to take them to that point, so they know how to handle it a bit better. But staying consistent for 7 days is just enough to prove to yourself that it's possible. As soon as you prove to yourself it's possible, you can do the same thing again. And this is so powerful because when you know you can do it again with confidence because you've already done it before. So you know it's possible, right? So when you've done it before, you can actually then do it again, but then keep it up for longer. Now, when you might mess up a day this time, at least you've kept a streak for longer. So for example, you might do it for a week one time, you know it's possible to do it for a week. So now you try it again. Let's say you can do 2 weeks this time, or you might even be able to do 3 weeks in a row. Compare that to the first week, you just done an extra 2 or 3 times consistency since the first time you tried it. Now, if you haven't even tried being consistent for 7 days, then maybe you should make this week the time to try. But yeah, the emotional state you're feeling, that's what we're trying to be consistent with for 7 days. So that is the third sense of the soul, which is emotions. Now, the fourth sense of the soul is actually your imagination. So we all know that your imagination is one of our higher faculties, right? And our imagination is actually something that we can work on every single day through visualizing. And when we're visualizing as well, we are focusing on creation, because we're creating our future pretty much. And when we visualize, we actually, well, if you do the visualization with can't remember who, I think it's Jess. If you want to know which visualization that is, message in the group chat, I'll send it in there. But through visualization, when we actually do this specific one, she says, now live it as if it's already real. And when we do this, we're basically living in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And when we do this, it's like we're already there. So that when we do this is creating it in the spiritual. because we feel like we're already there. Now, the subconscious can't actually tell the difference between what's real and what is not. The imagination can create whatever it wants. That's why sometimes you might have a dream and you think it's real, because the subconscious can't tell the difference. So when you're doing a visualization and it's so powerful and you can actually see, you can see what you're creating, you know what you're creating for your future, that's when you can actually connect to it on a different level. And when you come out of a visualization that's that powerful, you already know that it's done. Your belief is going to go way higher. So the fourth sense that we have is our imagination. And also with our imagination, it goes both ways. We can either imagine what we want to happen, or we can imagine what we don't want to happen. Now, when we imagine what we want to happen, this is us focusing on our goals. This is us focusing on, the life that we want to live, the things that we want to have, our goals actually being completed. And we know that it's going to happen. We have an undying belief that it's going to be achieved because we've said it's going to happen. We've written it down on our goal card. So ultimately, time just has to catch up and bring it into the physical because it's already been created in the spiritual. So that's only if we focus on what we want to happen. Now, if we imagine what we don't want to happen, if we imagine the negative scenarios, if we imagine, what if this happens, what if that happens, if we imagine the doubts, if we imagine the fears, if we imagine our insecurities being exposed, this is actually focusing on the lack of our goal. And when we focus on the lack of our goal, we are focusing on not the goal. So ultimately, when we're focusing on what we want and we're imagining what we want, that's what's going to be brought into our experience. But when we are focusing on the lack of our goal and what we don't want to happen, that is also what we're going to bring into our experience. So think about what you're imagining, think about what you're visualizing, think about what you're feeding yourself and seeing in your mind every day. Are you seeing what you want to happen? Are you seeing what you want to actually create into your life? Or are you seeing what you don't want? Because when you see what you don't want, that's another reason why you might be stuck where you are. Because you keep thinking the same things. You keep thinking it's not going to work for me. You keep thinking, oh no, I don't think I could do this, all that kind of stuff. And that's why you're staying in the same place, because you're just attracting more of that into your reality. Whereas we want to focus on, what we do want to happen. We want to imagine a life of abundance. We want to imagine a life of freedom. We want to imagine a life of, financial stability and all of this stuff, because that's what we want to happen. So when we focus on that, what you focus on is what you give your attention to. I can't remember the quote. It's like, where your attention goes, your energy flows. So if we put more energy into what we do want to happen and imagine that, then that's how we're going to bring it into our experience faster, because we believe it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. So the more we focus on it, the quicker it's going to come through law of attraction. And ultimately, when you are focusing on it, your vibration is going to go up as well. So we have a high vibration, we're focusing on our goal, we know it's going to happen, we have belief. All we have to do now is put in the actions, and then we will get it. Because that's when we become deserving of it. When we have got rid of the fears, when we have got rid of the doubts, when we believe it 100%, then all we have to do to essentially deserve it is put in action, because we already know it's ours. Okay, so that's why your imagination is so important, and that's how you know your imagination is a sense of the soul. So when you have these thoughts, because technically your thoughts are what you're imagining, right? When you have these thoughts, what are you actually imagining? Are you imagining what you want, or are you imagining what you don't want? So that was the fourth sense of the soul, your imagination. So now the fifth one is your intellect. So your intellect is basically your intelligence, because it's one thing to know some information, and it's also another thing to take action on that information. So it's basically what you pour into yourself every day. Like we spoke about earlier about the mind, right? What are you pouring into yourself every day? So the mind section is more so what are you pouring into yourself, and the intellect sense is more how are you actually utilizing that? How are you applying that in your day-to-day life to, bring about what you want, to bring about the goals that you want and to get you closer to them. So what actually makes you intelligent is actually applying the information that you've learned, because intellect is just the capacity of knowledge, but taking knowledge and applying it is actually, using it for the purpose of getting to where you want to be. Now, if you do have a morning routine, put that in the chat real quick. Okay, so we do have some people who have morning routines. So when you have your morning routine, if you, what kind of things do you have in it? Do you incorporate these things like without even knowing what they were? For example, when you're pouring into your minds, when you're working on the sense of your soul, which is your mind, what are you reading every day? Are you reading the personal development? Because if reading is part of your morning routine, then that is automatically working on one of your senses first thing in the morning, and you didn't even realize. You know, also the willpower, having the will to show up, right? That is also something you can do every day just by simply waking up at the time your alarm goes off. With visualizing, right? Making sure you feel good when you're visualizing. That is when you're working on your imagination. And the intellect is when you take this information and apply it. So those who apply the information that they learn through things like this, through Alpha Wednesday, through Mornings with Nano, through reading the personal development, listening to the audios, those are the people who are going to have the the success journeys because they know what's going on and they're aware. Now, awareness is how you can actually get the new ideas to think from, and when you have the new ideas to think from, this is how you can change the results you're getting to either accelerate your progress, right? So take these senses of the soul and apply it to your life, and make sure to work on these 5 senses every single day, and then success is yours very much. So I'll just expand this.